I want to share something with you, and it was inspired by a dream. Now, the nice thing about spiritualism, and this is not just about spiritualism, this is about anything. But the nice thing about spiritualism is that it encourages you to investigate. And how do we investigate? Well, first we ask questions. Where I start with questions. Not necessarily what I've observed, but I ask questions. And when I don't get answers, I go looking for them. Usually I look for them in books. I think one of our previous soul sessions here referred to me as this one who looks into the past. So I get a lot of information from books. And the thing we have to be aware of or careful of when we investigate is sloppy thinking. And I want to share a little bit with you about a dream or a segment of dream that I had this morning. And in this particular dream, I keep my notes on Microsoft OneNote. Once I figured out how it worked and everything, I used to keep them on Word, but now I keep them on OneNote. So I'm in the dream, I'm writing in my notes from OneNote on a lecture, and it occurred to me as I'm listening to this, I went up to my instructor because it wasn't the lecture, it was somebody else, but I couldn't see who they were. I just went up to this instructor and I said, this person here is going through great lengths to tell me that this minor god was Greek. Of course, you're probably thinking, okay, what's that got to do with anything? Absolutely nothing and everything at the same time. But when I got up, used the restroom, and come back, what was that about? And what came to mind was in my readings in the Kabbalah, I forget which book it was. I want to say Adolf Frank's The Philosophy of the Jews, but I could be wrong. It could be something else. But in that, the early authors in their writings, they had this habit of taking these Greek philosophers, early Greek philosophers that had lived before they lived, because by the time they got around to writing the Kabbalah in a fashion that people started translating and everything, they had lived and died. So I forget which Greek philosopher it was, but I'm reading this, and they're telling me, the person who wrote the introduction to this translation is telling me that they tried to say that this early philosopher was actually a Jewish person, a forerunner of the Jewish faith. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. But the early writers of the Christian beliefs, and I don't want to say Christian forefathers, because most of those people didn't know how to read and write. Because most of those people, when they gave their lessons, they did what spiritualists do. The better ones, I should say. Somebody just shut the lights off on me. Must be an electrical problem, something for me to do. So, as I'm continuing with this, You know, the early Christian forefathers, they taught and gave lessons in the same fashion as a good spiritualist will do. Kind of sort of like our circles that we do on the fourth Sunday, where I'm making this connection and we get these teachings that come through. That's how the forefathers of the Christian religion taught. And they connected. They said they would connect probably with Jesus or the angels. Who knows? But that's how they taught. And then you get this hierarchy that begins to form. And the further up on the hierarchy, the more supposedly intelligent these people became. But they could read and write. And what these authors would do is, oh, well, this was actually a Christian author that was alive 100, 200 years earlier. What's going on here? What's going on here? I'll tell you that when you read a lot of these ancient writings, especially the Gnostic ones, you know, the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of my favorites that I teach from, the Gospel of Philip, you know, people would write these books, these scrolls, and because they were unknown, they would attribute them to somebody who was well known. That was just the way they did things. Shakespeare's time, they were doing the same thing. It's only when plagiarism became a problem that they stopped doing that. And I think that was in maybe the late 60s or 70s. So that gives you an idea how long they've been doing it. So I went up to my instructor and I said, you know, there's a problem here. This guy's trying to say that this minor god is a Greek god, a well-known Greek god. It's just not there. Sloppy thinking. Before I get into this any deeper, what are your thoughts about this whole idea of sloppy thinking so far, Sandy?
Well, if I'm understanding exactly the way what you're saying is that they tried to say that teachings long before the era of Christianity were attributed to Christianity, or teachings long before Judaism were attributed to Judaism before it was existed. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah, that's you got the gist of it.
Okay.
Along
Okay.
the lines.
Okay. Well, I guess a philosophy, and I would say that a philosophy is a philosophy, if at some point you can attribute it to thinking that of others or other group, if it fits with that, I guess it would fit, but that doesn't mean that it's attributed to them. The philosophy was there before they were there, if I'm getting that right. But it's probably not right to say it was, you know, to take the credit to take the credit for it. That's probably not right.
Yeah, you got the gist of it.
Okay.
Nicely done. Good job.
Thank you.
That it was adopted regardless of who wrote it. We decided, oh, I interpret this as to be from X and Y and Z.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with adopting good information.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if it makes sense, fantastic. Great. Now, let's look at some of the sloppy stuff. And, you know, I could only find one example of this. Maybe I got a couple of them in here. I'm not sure. But this particular one comes from the, I'm probably mispronouncing this, but the Ante-Nicene Fathers translation of the writing of the fathers down to AD 325, you know, that blah, 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 blah. But the idea here, and this is what I read, the deity or snake representing the dragon glided over a woman's breast. And the snake, the dragon, has many, many meanings associated with it, such as wisdom. So think of this as wisdom gliding over, and you don't have to say a woman's breast. You could say gliding over the planet, gliding over an egg. Now, you got that idea in mind. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. Let that set in a little bit. Let that set in a little bit. A dragon gliding over a woman's breast. The Spirit gliding over the waters. Which one is false? And are you present, Sharon?
Excuse me. I don't know why, but I'm going to say the first one.
The first one. That's fine. You don't have to know why, but that's fine. Okay. The first one. The dragon. All right. And Kurt, which one is false?
Me?
True, but that's a very deep subject, and I didn't wear my galoshes.
I love your questions. Give me the question again. What are my options?
Which one is false? The dragon gliding over a woman's breast, or the Spirit of God moving upon the face of the waters?
First.
The first one is false. Okay.
Why? Because God is in the infinite and can do anything God wants. Therefore, in the present moment, God is all things, doing everything at once, quantumly speaking.
Okay. And Beth is in front of me here, shaking her head. So let's go to Beth.
Well, neither's false. They're both myths or stories about creation. But polytheism existed before monotheism. So in terms of ancientness, serpent gliding over a woman's breast, which I take as milk of life, creation, wisdom and milk of life, and creation, whatever. That would be a mythology that existed before the Judaic God over the waters mythology. But that's where my brain went. So neither's false. There's stories. It's how the oral storytellers passed down tradition. It's the only way they could. There was no writing.
I agree with Beth. It's an interpretation.
Read history.
It's an interpretation.
Exactly.
All right. So since it's an interpretation, what do these two have in common?
It's somebody else.
The moving with ease, the gliding.
Okay, moving with ease, the gliding. They both have that in common. That's a good start.
And both moving forward, continuing.
Continuously moving forward. That's a good start. Excellent. I like that. Good show. Would anyone else like to weigh in on this? Now, the idea that connections were made, and connections would have to have been made if you're coming to the conclusion of an interpretation. And we could start with the gliding. Both of them were gliding. Now, what is God? How is God described?
Infinite, all powerful.
What went out on me? Creator.
Intelligence,
What went out on me?
the light.
The light went out on me. God is most often described as a light. And the light represents, yes, intelligence. But the light represents more than just intelligence, because anybody can be smart. But what does it mean when you hear the phrase stupid smart? This was something my brother liked to use. Stupid smart. He called me that, stupid smart. But that's another story altogether.
Yeah, we'll discuss that at a later date.
So, when you decline God,
Define,
put
not decline.
boundaries. Oh, when you define God, you put boundaries on God. But a light is not really a definition of God. Because that is actually the truest description of God. The glory of God around a person is that light you see around them, that glow that you see around them, which we typically refer to as the aura. And light in the description of the
Pure energy.
of pure energy, yes, pure energy, but knowledge, and we're going back to how light was interpreted, because that's how we're investigating. We're investigating, and part of investigating is making connections. And light represents the intellect. But the intellect is nothing if you don't know how to use what you know. And it bends around and exists in vibration affecting everything. Yes, light does that, but we're talking about wisdom is what we're talking about. That's actually what the sun represents, wisdom. And when you look at the old writings, you come across light quite a bit. When you look at the tarot cards, you see light quite a bit. And it's always around the head. Typically around the head. You look at these 14, 13, maybe 1,200 paintings, religious figures, and there's this, they put this halo around them. That's the glory of God, this halo that's around them. That is the glory of God, and that represents their spiritual wisdom. Now, let's look at the dragon. What does the dragon represent?
Strength.
That was also kind of wisdom and knowledge.
All right, somebody's pooch has got everybody's attention. I must be getting boring. Ha ha. That's
I think
all.
it represents strength and power.
That's
Right.
what I was just gonna say, power. That's
Yes.
what it represents to me, power.
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
I must be in a disagreeable mood.
This says knowledge. The dragon, before it got all screwed up, represented wisdom. So in both instances, we have wisdom gliding over a woman's breast or across the water. We have wisdom moving across something. And in the earlier teachings, do you know what water also represented?
The womb.
The womb. Meaning, the water also represented the female. So,
Because we create and feed.
create and feed, nurture. Good job. Good job. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? I'll wait until I see that they've got their notes done, like Sandy there. I think I saw her eyes come up. What are your thoughts about that, Sandy?
Well, I guess I'm trying to take all this in, the representations. I guess I don't really have a specific conclusion on this at this point. I'm just kind of, I don't know. I like you said, I think both of the analogies are about the same thing. It's just different interpretations. But that's interesting about the water and the female, that I don't think I knew that. So that puts a different spin on it. Definitely.
Very good.
Philip,
Very. Yes.
I also feel that, again, these interpretations are a perspective, because some may see the dragon as something different. Some may see the water as life, which again can go back to the female and the giving and nurturing, because without water, we die. And without knowledge, we die. So it all comes back to one thing, which would be creation.
But I'm going to come back to what you said, perspective, which is very good. I like that word. It's a very important word, perspective is. Because neither one of you would have made the connection between the two without my presentation of my perspective. Now, it doesn't say that any of you are incorrect. Of course, it doesn't say anybody's right either. But what it does point out is everybody's perspective. And what I want to point out is, once I revealed or shared my perspective, you began making connections. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, and it's as if we're all looking through a prism and seeing different colors. One sees purple, one sees pink, one sees yellow, but it's the same prism.
Precisely. Precisely. And coming back to this whole idea of sloppy thinking. Sloppy thinking would be that this one is wrong and this one is correct. Sloppy thinking is seeing connections here and ignoring the connection. sloppy thinking is assuming something. Again, I like to say that spiritualism encourages us to investigate what we believe, our religion, everything. Because the whole purpose of investigation is to discover gaps. And when we discover a gap is, wait a second, what is that? A gap is a question. And the only way we discover gaps in our wisdom and our beliefs and our interpretation is by, what is that? Wait a second. This sounds like this. Let me look at this and make sure I'm on the right track. That is proper thinking. And yes, it's perspective. It is a matter of perspective. That's why I tell you that there's no such thing as universal truth, because our perspectives are different. And because of that difference, we are rich. Because of that difference, we can see things from different perspectives. So, as you go about, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Kurt, do you have any thoughts, any closing thoughts you'd like to add to this that you might like to share with us? What are your thoughts about all of this?
That, oh my gosh, we reside in the infinite. Oh my gosh, depending on your perspective, you see things, one facet of it, creating the reality. Shift your perception ever so slightly, the reality you see changes drastically. I love putting words together because they're meaningless. In essence, that there's so many perceptions that that's all I want to say.
That's a good way of putting things together, Kurt. Thank you.
I know. Thank you. On the spot, yes.
I like that train of thought.
It is a train wreck.
Yeah, but everybody always stops and looks.
Much is at stake on my train. I try to stay on the tracks.
So,
Okay.
Connie, what are your thoughts, closing thoughts on this?
Well, it's kind of hard to really say because it's an individualized thought. It's per person as they see it, as they feel it, and as they experience it. And you can't try to put everyone in the same box because it fits your narrative, which a lot of the messy thinking does. It's my narrative, so therefore that's how it is, the end. And that is not how it is.
Very good. I like the use of narrative, because we all have our way of seeing things, interpreting things, doing things. We all have our way. And the better of us know that our way is not the only way. So nicely put, Connie. Thank you. And how about you, Beth? What are your thoughts about this? Closing thoughts.
Oh, it is great discussion. I really like hearing people's trains of thought, their perspectives, how they come to their, each of our conclusions.
Okay. And how about you, Sandy? What are your closing thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with what Connie, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. I'm sorry. Anyway,
Yeah, Connie.
I just feel, I think that's where the danger lies, where the narrative becomes a truth that everyone that draws people in because it's what they want. There's power in that number of people who agree with the same thing. But it's also very dangerous because it puts a wall around anything else. So I like the narrative to be open, because if you sit and look at it from a different perspective, you're both right. Even though you've boxed yourself into this particular thinking, this thinking over here is exactly the same. It's just looking at it from a different place. So, and I think that's where where society gets in a lot of trouble, because they pigeonhole themselves into one thing, and then to the exclusion of everyone else. So I guess that's where I see that. But great discussion. Great. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice summarization there. And how about you, Sharon? What are your last thoughts?
Well, and as it has been with each one of us, we've all had a different facet to share. So, and the thought crossed my mind that because each of us has a different understanding or a different view of this, that's the right view for us for now. So that doesn't mean that tomorrow I may not look over a little differently from a different perspective and see it very differently. So, and hence the growth, that's what we want, is growth. So we benefit from today and we'll benefit from tomorrow if we see it in a different way. And next year we look back and say, oh my gosh, how could I have seen it that way? Now I see it so much more clearly. Or, this is what a difference a year makes, or something to that effect. So, yeah. So I feel like we're all right. we're all where we're supposed to be in our view and our vision. And we see it as we see it now. And the beauty is that it's one more step on our path to take us forward and to our future. So that's it.
Nice thought, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. As to who would put it, the kids are all right.
Yep. Yep.
There's nothing wrong with us going through life with blinders on. It's just the way we are. However, it's nice if we can adjust those blinders to take in as much as possible that we're ready for. Sloppy thinking is when you choose to be ignorant. Oh yeah, this connects this, yeah, but this is wrong. This is right. That's sloppy thinking. That's ignorance. And that is something that spiritualism encourages us to resolve. Spiritualism does not force us to think alike, like some of the contemporary religious teachings of the day. Spiritualism tells you it's your story. So tell it like it is for you, because my story is going to be very different from yours. And you know what? It's all right. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to share this with you, and I want to thank each of you for your contributions.